Hot Springs, the beautiful city in the heart of Arkansas, and a land among the Ouachita's and the source of the finest water in the country. The Spa City, with all its splendors and luxuries, was a gateway for some of the most notorious of men. Hot Springs was also home to the largest illegal gambling operation in the U.S. The rudiments of the gangster involvement can be found in the Gangster Museum of America, located in downtown Hot Springs.
The Gangster Museum of America is the actual history of Hot Springs from about 1920s, from the 20s to 67 when gambling ended here. The significance of gambling here is it brought a lot of famous people here, spring training baseball players. We had celebrities, giants of industry, a lot of wealthy people here, a lot of sick people coming to take the baths, and a lot of mobsters. They could come down here, nobody really cared who they were. The police were all kind of in on it, and the judges. So as long as everybody got their cut and no one hurt anybody, everything here was fair game. Well, they loved to gamble because they had a lot of money. And the Texas oil men loved to gamble, and so there was always fair game for anyone who liked to gamble to come up here and play cards, not necessarily playing against the house, but playing cards, sitting across a card table with rival road gamblers like, Red Doc Murphy and some really big time road gamblers, Benny Binion, who, would frequent here and Las Vegas. Las Vegas during the real glory days of Hot Springs didn't have any water. They didn't have water until 1947. So when Rancho Deluxe and Cedar Gulch were two little towns, and the Hoover Dam put water to those two little towns, and Las Vegas grew up in between those two towns. So Nevada boomed, but it really boomed after Hot Springs closed down in 67, at least the gambling part of it. The FBI said that in 1963 it was $100 million a year illegal gambling business. Gambling is illegal in Arkansas. It always has been, and it still is. But it existed here because everyone, legislators, governors, everyone got a cut, even the churches.
It's easy to see how Hot Springs became a haven for criminals. One of the most notorious was Oni the Killer Madden, referred to the English Godfather. Madden arrived in Hot Springs in 1935 seeking a slower lifestyle than the one he had accustomed to in New York City. Originally from England, Madden grew up in rough neighborhoods of Manhattan's Hell's Kitchen and is credited with putting the organized crime. Well respected and well liked, Madden settled in Hot Springs very easily. Eventually, more and more gangsters arrived.
Oni Madden came here in the early 30s, met a girl, went back to New York. He was on hiatus from Sing Sing. He spent 9 years. But when he came back in 1932, Franklin Roosevelt exiled him from New York. He still had a lot of profit-holding companies up in New York. He moved to Hot Springs, eventually married the postmaster's daughter, and died in 1965, but in between times he started a great wire service or off-track betting service here. He was instrumental in the Southern Club and in Belvedere, and was just a really reformed guy who, wire service and off-track betting wasn't illegal back then, so he really stayed pretty close to the law. As a matter of fact, the chief of police lived next door to him, and across the street on Grand Avenue was an field agent FBI guy. So, they constantly were watching him, but he became friends with most of them, and they really felt he had gone legitimate. I mean, he owned part of a Tropical Park racetrack for a long time. He and Meyer Lansky. It's his friends they really worried about, Albert Anastasia and Lucky Luciano, and these guys that came down here to visit him, Frank Costello especially, Carlos Marcello up from New Orleans. These guys came in here, and the FBI was really concerned about them. Didn't really know what they were up to. And indeed, probably Madden was passing some messages back and forth between rival or at least partnering organized crime entities where they couldn't be traced. So he pretty much owned the phone service.
I met up with Baron Way, a lifelong citizen of Hot Springs. As we drove around the city, he told me about his grandfather's bar and the gangster involvement in the Spa City.
My grandpa owned a club back in the 1940s called the Bridge Street Club. And it was gambling, and it had liquor, and you know, it was your back then. I mean, that was the thing. And he actually had famous people like Al Capone and some other guys walk into his bar, his club, and gambled and stuff like that. But he told me a bunch of stories of how, you know, Al Capone, and I don't know if it was Bugsy Siegel or Lucky Luciano, somebody that he had one of his big rivals. They both liked to vacation in hot springs because they love to take the hot baths. So they would both, they might come on the same week for a vacation with their family, and they would come and they would make they'd sit down and they'd say, okay, let's make a treaty kind of thing. And Al Capone said, I'll stay at the Arlington. That's my hotel anyway. You stay at the Majestic, whoever it was, I can't remember who it was. And for 2 weeks, you don't mess with me, I don't mess with you. I don't try to get into your business affairs, you don't get into mine. You don't try to kill none of my fellas, I won't try to kill none of yours. And you stay on your side of Bathhouse Road, Central Avenue, I'll stay on my side. There are tunnels that go all downtown that go under the streets of Central Avenue, Bathhouse Road. And you can walk completely underneath them. And they say that that's where Al Capone and Lucky Luciano, Oni Madden was a big gangster from he lived here in Hot Springs. He actually had a house on Lake Hamilton. But they would, let's just say that the police came into the hotel to try to bust them. Well, there was little passageways that they could leave the Arlington or the Majestic and go underneath the streets of Central Avenue, Bathhouse Row, and they could, get away or hide or smuggle things or whatever they needed to do.
This is the story of the bad, the ruthless, and the heartless. This is the Gangsters of the Spa City.